Model that's trained to take in a piece of text and predict what comes next. That input text is first broken into a bunch of tokens, which means little chunks that are typically words or little pieces of words. And each token is associated with a high-dimensional vector, which is to say a long list of numbers. This sequence of vectors then repeatedly passes through two kinds of operation. Attention, which allows the vectors to pass information between one another, and then the multi-layer perceptrons, the thing that we're going to dig into today. And also there's a certain normalization step in between. After this sequence of vectors has flowed through many different iterations of both of these blocks, by the end, the hope is that each vector has soaked up enough information, both from the context, all of the other words in the input, and also from the general knowledge that was baked into the model weights through training, that it can be used to make a prediction of what token comes next. One of the key ideas that I want you to have in your mind is that all of these vectors live in a very high dimensional space, and when you think about that space, different directions can encode different kinds of meaning. So a very classic example that I like to refer back to is how if you look at the embedding of woman and subtract the embedding of man, and you take that little step and you add it to another masculine noun, something like uncle, you land somewhere very close to the corresponding feminine noun. In this sense, this particular direction encodes gender information. And the idea is that many other distinct directions in this super high dimensional space could correspond to other features that the model might want to represent. In a transformer, these vectors don't merely encode the meaning of a single word, though. As they flow through the network, they imbibe a much richer meaning based on all the context around them, and also based on the model's knowledge. Ultimately, each one needs to encode something far beyond the meaning of a single word, since it needs to be sufficient to predict what will come next. We've already seen how attention blocks let you incorporate context, but a majority of the model parameters actually live inside the MLP blocks, and one thought for what they might be doing is that they offer extra capacity to store facts. Like I said, the lesson here is going to center on the concrete toy example of how exactly it could store the fact that Michael Jordan plays basketball. Now this toy example is going to require that you and I make a couple of assumptions about that high dimensional space. In the last two chapters, you and I started counting up the total number of parameters in GPT-3 and seeing exactly where they live, so let's quickly finish up the game here. I already mentioned how this up projection matrix has just under 50,000 rows, and that each row matches the size of the embedding space, which for GPT-3 is 12,288. Multiplying those together, it gives us 604 million parameters just for that matrix. And the down projection has the same number of parameters, just with a transposed shape. So together, they give about 1.2 billion parameters. The bias vector also accounts for a couple more parameters, but it's a trivial proportion of the total, so I'm not even going to show it. In GPT-3, this sequence of embedding vectors flows through not one, but 96 distinct MLPs, so the total number of parameters devoted to all of these blocks adds up to about 116 billion. This is around 2/3 of the total parameters in the network, and when you add it to everything that we had before for the attention blocks, the embedding, and the unembedding, you do indeed get that grand total of 175 billion as advertised. It's probably worth mentioning there's another set of parameters associated with those normalization steps that this explanation has skipped over, but like the bias vector, they account for a very trivial proportion